In this video, I'm going to be showing you and talking to you about gorge violin cases. What is a gorge violin case? Well, it is a violin case no longer being made by the company Gorge, and these cases are really well known for their simple design, durability, and being instantly recognizable, mostly by string players. So they're antiques and highly collectible now, and can only be found through private sale or at auction. All right, so here it is. This is the first Gorge case I purchased. I actually got this from a violin dealership that wasn't actually selling it. I called them to see if they had any used ones lying around that they'd be willing to sell. And to my surprise, they had one there that they were giving out as, I think, for violin loans, or when they loan out instruments. And I made an offer on it, and they accepted, and walked out the front door with my very first used but new to me Gorge case. So this particular example here came with a brown canvas cover. You can see this one here has a black canvas cover, and they actually included a new cover with it, which was amazing because the original brown color canvas cover definitely had seen some worn. I know the shoulder strap rings on it were pretty much at the end of their life. It didn't have the original blanket that usually accompanied these cases, and you can see it's missing a bowl holder there. But for a case that's gone through quite a bit of wear and tear and has seen some long days on the road, I mean, it looks brand new. So one of the interesting things about the design of this case is how it opens. Of course, with all canvas cover cases, there's a zipper that goes around the circumference of the case, and then you have the main buckle. With Gorge cases in particular, I've always found it amazing with how steady the case is when it's open. And a lot of violinists, violists will usually stuff a lot of music in the top folder part of their case. And I think put tons of music in here, and this case is so solid that it'll never actually fall over. This is one of the dangers with putting music in the top folder of a case, is that sometimes it would get so heavy and the case would fall over with the violin in it. And that's, again, another example of the violin being easy to break when not playing it. But since Gorge cases are so heavy, this has really never been an issue for me. And usually with these particular straps that keep the top part of the case at a 90-degree angle, Gorge puts two of these here for extra security so that it's not wobbly on one side. So it really creates a very sturdy hold for your violin when you're not playing it or you're on break backstage. It's a very solid and very secure place to put your instrument. So a few kind of key features about this particular case, as you can see here, starting off the most obvious, is that it is an oblong case. It's not a molded case, but the interior of the case is molded for the violin. So you can see how the fiddle really sits in nice and snug right in here. And these cases, I think, fit most full-size violins, maybe except for some ones with really kind of wide bellies. It's got a square cut out here for the peg box, and then it has two storage compartments here. One is really big that can hold rosin and a shoulder rest, and a smaller one here that you could, I don't know, maybe put some pencils in, or 10 spare mutes. And you can see here, this is probably one of the most recognizable features about this case is the Gorge emblem here. And here you can see, it's pretty awesome, made in England by Mick Gordge. I don't know what his middle name is. Do leave it in the comments if you know. I couldn't find it anywhere online. So yeah, it's those two little tags there that really stand out. A few things that that are missing, one of which is the bow holder here. I don't know how that came off, but it's not there anymore. But I only usually carry two bows with me, so it's at least has the bottom two bow holders with the case. Another problem with it too, actually, it had the original brown canvas cover, but it was completely beat up. So this case has seen some road wear along the way. But fortunately, they actually gave me a new canvas cover, a black one. So as you can see, it has a black canvas cover, which actually matches quite a few things, which is the kind of leather bonded or fake leather bonded outer shell of the case, which is basically just over plywood. And probably saw this right away. This is a thermostat. This tells the, not thermostat, it's a humidistat. It tells the humidity of the environment inside of the case when the lid is closed, obviously. And this particular feature was not original to Gorge's design. I think these were added probably in the late 90s, just to kind of keep up with a lot of other violin cases that were being introduced that had a built-in humidifier and humidistat. And I heard from somewhere that Mick Gordge wasn't terribly pleased with the idea of putting a humidistat in there. He really liked kind of like the long, simple design of this case and didn't want to put humidistat there. I think it looks all right. It's functional, but I can see why he wouldn't like it, because he probably didn't make the humidistat. He probably ordered a bunch of them and then just kind of plopped them in there. Another thing that's a little different about this one, it doesn't have the original, and I'll show it on the next case, doesn't have the classic gold double spring locking mechanism on here. This is kind of, again, an attempt at something more modern. It does look more modern, but again, it kind of takes away from the classic Gorge look. As you can see, the handle to this case is quite solid. This is almost like a briefcase handle. And this case, as I said before, weighs in at about 10 pounds. So you need a good, solid handle on it. You don't want this coming off when you're running on the subway. And there's a few different ways to carry this case. There's also little attachments here for, I think, a shoulder strap. And that's actually nailed right into the case, or riveted right into the case, the plywood body. You can also carry it with a shoulder strap connected to these rings here, which are sewn into the canvas cover. I think these are probably pretty durable as well, but I have seen them fray over time on some other cases. So, yeah, so this probably would have been one of the first things to go. I know on the original brown canvas cover, these were completely worn through. So I try not to use this too much when I'm carrying it outside. So the thing I really like about Gorge cases is that the way they hold the violin is really quite snug and amazing. And a lot of modern violin cases, they now incorporate a suspension in which the violin sort of sits about here in the case. And that's so if you drop the case that the violin is kind of resting on the top and bottom blocks here. And suspension is always a good thing, but I find that when the violin is sitting up above the mold where the violin goes, sometimes if you're actually reaching to grab your violin, your nails can hit the side of it here. So I actually like the fact that the violin sits right down in the case, and that is a really, really snug fit. Also, the reason that there's that it's so thin, the case is so thin, is because it's not making room for the suspension. So the case is definitely thinner when it's closed, and that's easier to stick in like an overhead compartment to a plane. But one thing that's cool, it has the original string holder in here. There's a little clip-in string holder, and got the little carrier box for certain items is in really, really good condition. So for a first example of a Gorge case, I was really, really happy with this one, and actually took really, really good care of it, to the point of putting these little cardboard inserts in my bow holder so I wouldn't get rosin caked up in it. And these were actually, the velvet interior here is really, really quality material, and for a case that's definitely seen some years and some road wear, it's in like near perfect condition. So again, really, really happy with it. Fast forward a few years after the purchase of my original moss green Gorge case, another case became available on auction, and that was the Tarisio T2 auction, I think. Those of you who are bidding on this case probably now are figuring out who's the winner of that auction buy. But first, let me get to kind of some of the features of this case before I kind of tell my whole first-time auction experience story here. This is actually a double violin Gorge case, and the thing I really love about it is that the violin, the two violins you would carry in it, kind of interlock at the scroll. So one violin would go here, and the other fiddle, of course, would go there. And there's very little wasted space in this case. But then again, there's very little room to put anything else. I have a feeling that this case would probably have been really beneficial for a violin dealer that is not carrying a lot of other things like raws and in-shoulder rests if they just want to carry very simply two violins to a particular destination. I actually looked up photos of some original Gorge double violin cases, and a previous model had the violins actually sitting parallel to each other, the bodies at the same position. So you can imagine how large a case that would be. So this case almost looks like a single violin case just because it's so well thought out. And I'm not sure if this case was custom ordered or custom made. I've yet to find out. If you know, the person who's watching this, please leave a comment. Maybe you had it made, or maybe you gave it to Tarisio or sold it through Tarisio. So I'd love to hear from you and kind of see what the story is from this case. Anyways, it's a really brilliant blue color, and the photos on the auction site, it looked a little bit tacky. I wasn't sure if I liked it or not, but then when I received the case in the mail after the auction, I thought it looked really, really fantastic. And to my surprise, on the auction site, it was listed as in great condition or good condition. And when I received it, it was actually brand new. So I actually keep this case as sort of a museum piece. I don't really carry it around. I don't put any violins in it. I keep it mainly as a museum piece. And you can see this particular case has all the bow holders, all of that stuff, and two little, I don't know what you would put in there, maybe two Advils or something like that. It could maybe hold two Advil liquid gels if you had a headache. And then again, everything else about it is very much like the original Gorge case. It's got the top pocket here. And it has, again, all the emblems, the logo, and then the signature of Mick Gordge there. Yeah, and the canvas cover is the original brown color, kind of the classic brown color that is very instantly recognizable from Gorge cases. It has the gold zippers. The only thing that's a little different is the eyelets here for the shoulder strap. These, I'm not sure what this is made of. It's not the original brass like you would have had on some of these classic Gorge cases, but who knows if this was, again, another attempt at sort of giving it a more modern look. But it does have the classic double spring buckle here with the locking mechanism, which I was really happy with, because this, again, is sort of a signature feature of a lot of Gorge cases. And this thing, surprisingly enough, is not much heavier than a single Gorge case. That goes back to what I was saying about how well it's designed and how well it's thought out. To put two violins kind of facing each other like this at the scroll, it's really quite fantastic. You would either think it's a viola case or a single violin case at first glance. So I'll make an attempt at a little bit of Gorge history here. From what little there is to read online now, there used to be a lot of information to read about Mick Gordge on the internet, and recently it's been really difficult to find things. So again, as I mentioned before, leave some comments in the comment section if you have anything to add to this. From what I know, he used to work for Hill & Sons. He used to make cases for Hill & Sons, and you can actually look up some images on the internet and kind of see what style those cases were. He later went on to form his own company, Mick Gordge, and then you had the famous Gorge cases. And after his passing, another company came into existence called the T.A. Timms, and I believe some people from this company used to make cases for Gorge, correct me if I'm wrong, But the really interesting thing about the sort of three generations of case making is you can see the sort of similar style of English handmade cases that have gone from Hill to Timms. So the thing I find interesting about these three generations of case makers is that you can kind of see how this relates to other aspects of music. If you look at composers, influences from composer to composer, from musician to musician, and a lot of times from violin maker to violin maker, you see this kind of influence and carrying on of traditions. And you definitely see that from Hill to Gorge to Timms. So that's why for even a violin case, I look at these things very much the same way I would a musical instrument or a piece of music. So one of the things I've always loved about Gorge cases is that there's sort of an insurance policy for your violin. They're extremely heavy. Mine weighs in at about 10 pounds. The moss green case with a violin in it, yeah, it weighs in at about 10 pounds, and you really feel it when you carry it. And a lot of people don't like the fact that these cases were so heavy, because when you'd carry it around before a concert or rehearsal, you know, you'd show up with a really tired and sore arm unless you carried it on the shoulder strap. But even with that, you'd get a sore shoulder with that. So that was kind of a problem with them. But the great thing about them is that it would really protect your violin. When you're not playing a violin, it's really easy to have accidents. When you're playing a violin and you're playing it properly, it's very unlikely you'll break it or have any kind of accidents. The most you could do is break a string or break a hair on your bow. And having a heavy violin case is great because when you put it down on a surface, either a chair or the floor, it's got that weight to it, so it won't fall over. It's hard for it to tip over, and it's very much anchored to the ground. With a lot of modern carbon fiber cases, I've always found, although they're wonderful to carry around for long tours, they're very unstable. I've had really close encounters where I've put my case on a chair or a bench next to me, and I've just only bumped into it a little bit, but the case goes flying, you know, and it has absolutely no mass to it, so it's it can be kind of risky. So I always prefer carrying a nice violin in one of these style cases. So I decided to make this video about Gorge cases because I've always really admired their design and a lot of different qualities about them, but also there are currently no videos, and I think I'm right on this, there are no videos about Gorge cases on YouTube or Vimeo or any other video platform. So I thought this would be a good way to get the ball rolling on discussing these, what I think are really fantastic instrument cases. And recently, from a while back, they've been really sought after from instrument collectors, and that's really interesting to me because it's not an instrument, it's a case. So it's sort of unusual that this sort of thing would be going up in value, and I think that has a lot to do with their sudden appearance at auction sites and people bidding on them, because after 2000, I think it was impossible to actually buy a Gorge case. You would have had to buy one used. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story with obtaining this case. This case came up on the Tarisio auction site, I think maybe about 5, 6 years ago, and I saw it and looked at it quite a bit and thought to myself this would be a great attempt at purchasing a second Gorge case. The photos looked appealing and everything looked really nice about it. So when the bidding opened up, I placed a few bids. The whole time I was bidding on this case, I had actually been telling my wife about Gorge cases and why they're special, and why a lot of string players like them. And she had never heard of them before, so without me knowing, she actually went online and started reading about these cases on a lot of forums, and saw that a lot of musicians were asking questions like, where do I buy these? How can I get one? So she actually eventually saw the value in this particular case, and without me knowing, she actually signed up for an account on Tarisio and started bidding. Now fortunately, I had quit bidding and she knew this, so we weren't bidding against each other. And one day during a rehearsal, we had a rehearsal break in orchestra, and I checked the auction site and saw that the case had been sold to this bidder. And I was a little bit sad about that because I knew I wouldn't get the case. But I later found out that my wife had actually won the case. She had placed the winning bid. End of the story is she told me she had won it, and I eagerly awaited it in the mail. And as I said before, to my delight, it was in brand new condition. It actually was a brand new case. And I don't think I've ever been able to come up with as creative a gift for my wife since that. I'm still working on it, but I thought that was pretty amazing what she did, and that was an incredible surprise for me. So this concludes my video. I hope you found it interesting and informative. If you're a musician or a music enthusiast, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments on any of the things I talked about with Gorge cases. If you have a Gorge case, please share a photo or maybe talk about your experience purchasing one or why you think that they're so special. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.